The main idea for today is actually the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is one of these things that you either love it or you hate it, and there's no way of getting around it. For some people, they love it because it works every single time. There's no time it doesn't work. It just works, and you'll use it to this year. You'll use it next year. You'll use it a lot. Um, but others don't like it just because there's sometimes they forget where different pieces go, and it kind of backfires on them. Okay, so this video is just really to show you how the different pieces of a quadratic actually plug into the quadratic formula itself. So just as a reminder, you should remember this, but we're going to use shapes and colors here to kind of help you connect the dots. Everything always starts with a, right? It's always ax squared, is in that rectangle. Then we have bx in that oval, and then we have our c in our heart here. And so as long as it's equal to 0, we would try and factor this, right? And sometimes factoring is going to be the better option. But what if factoring doesn't work? What if factoring doesn't work? Because not everything is factorable. Well, if factoring doesn't work, then we're going to have a backup method. And our backup method in this case is the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is this massive thing, but it plugs in the same every single time. So the very first thing is you start out by taking you'll notice that there's a little negative here. But I don't want you to think of that word as that negative as a negative sign. What I want you to think of that is I want you to think of that as the word opposite. Okay, so I'm going to highlight it here, the word opposite. Okay, the opposite of something. So that negative there actually means to take the opposite, write that in. Okay, it means to take the opposite of B, right? The opposite of B. So whatever B is, let's just say that B is 7, then we're going to write down negative 7. If B is negative 4, we're going to write down positive 4. Whatever your B value is, you just write down the opposite of it. The next thing is this right here. Now you might be thinking, well, what in the world is that? That just is a plus and a minus at the same time. Now, we don't actually do addition and subtraction at the same time, but we just write it. Because what's actually going to happen is this is going to split into two separate answers, like we've been getting. We've been getting lots of answers where we have two of them, right? And that's because at one point we're adding and at one point we're subtracting. That's where this plus or minus comes from. So hang in there for a minute. I'll show you why it's there later on. But you have both a plus and a minus. Next, we have a massive square root sign. So we have this massive square root, and everything else that's on top is underneath that square root. So we have a massive square root, and underneath the square root, we start by, I would encourage you to put everything here in parentheses. So the next thing is going to be this B value again, not the opposite this time, just the regular B. And that B value is being squared. We're squaring that B value. And then we have a minus 4. Now this minus 4 is there. No matter what it looks like, that minus 4 is always there. And there's a property behind that's way over yours and not even something that I'm that interested in. But there's a property within quadratics that creates this negative 4. So there's always a minus 4 there. And then once you've got the minus 4, you're then going to multiply that. I'm going to use parentheses again, times A. And then you're going to multiply that times C. Now, I just like to use parentheses because it really keeps things clean. It keeps things organized, makes sure that everything's good. But notice that all of that was underneath the radical, right? So I'm going to highlight this. All of this was underneath the radical, and I'm highlighting it for a reason. When we get to actually doing these problems, we're going to take that pink box, and we're going to plug that pink box into our calculator, aka Desmos, and we're going to plug it in separately, okay? So it's really important that we are able to find that pink box as well, okay? But the formula still isn't done. So let's come back and finish the formula before we jump into an example. The last thing is that the entire thing is being divided, right? That entire thing is being divided by two things. By a 2, right? And then times, that 2 is being times by a, by 2a. So this looks crazy, but the best way to really get into it is to do an example. So in the next video, you're going to see an example of how the quadratic formula solves a quadratic.